Hello, everyone. This is Marita, one who catches lightning, with the Path of Ish podcast, Walking with Our Shadow, where we share ancient indigenous teachings of remembrance, all so we can walk and learn how to walk a path of radical self-love. Welcome, everyone. This is Marita, one who catches lightning with the Path of Ish, here with another opportunity to slow down, to reset, and to welcome you back into circleness. Today, I'm super excited to invite an amazing visionary, teacher, and author, Perdita Finn, into the circle. And we're going to have a conversation and let, in her own words, tell you her creation story and how writing and nature and the rhythm of all that is something that is in their bones. Welcome, Perdita.
It's so glad to be here, Marita. It's wonderful to be talking with you.
Yes, it's lovely to connect here. And for those of you who do not know Perdita, would you tell us in your own words your creation story?
That was such an incredible invitation. You know, I want to go, which life? Which life? Which self? In my current incarnational experience, I am helping people recover the language of the dead and talk to the dead. Mm-hmm. And that began for me, the creation story for that began, it's a story I tell in the book I just wrote, but it's a long one. I had just had a child. I just had a daughter. And I went home to see my mother. There I was in a house with my mother and my daughter, feeling the anguish of the generations, which materialized as just real, just out of control rage against my mother, who told me, you know, I think what sparked it was she said, let the baby cry. And, you know, which is was her generation, was what they were told to do. But it was just resentment and recrimination and rage. And then the horror of sort of wondering if this was what was always going to be inevitable between the generations, and having just had a child, you know, was this child going to be raging at me like this? And were we all set against each other? And I felt furious and hopeless, and it was a terrible fight. Just did my mother and I are really good fight to the death people. So it was it was a good
adversaries.
Yeah, we were two powerful women going at it. I went downstairs, and my mother's house was all glass. She was a gardener, and she designed a house that was all glass so she could grow all her plants inside. And I felt all these faces looking in. Faces, back and back and back. And it was very, very, you know, it was one of those moments between imagination and perception that was sort of turned me inside out, and it steadied me. And I said, you know, this ends with me.
Yeah.
We got to stop this. What's going on? What's going on here? And I went upstairs where my mother was in bed and weeping. And I noticed my mother was not a religious person, nor was she a spiritual person. And this might have been her first lifetime as a human being. So, you know what I mean? She was not somebody who talked much woo-woo or anything, very practical, earthy person. But I looked across from her bed, and I realized the entire wall had become pictures of the dead. And they were the dead I'd been seeing outside the house. And I didn't know what that meant. And I had no container in 1993 for that. I was a Zen student, a student of psychoanalysis. And boy, this experience did not fit into either of those containers. And I began talking to the dead. and everything changed. That's all I can say. They started showing up. I started talking to them. They started showing up. I started collaborating with them. They became realer and realer for me. And I realized I was at the same time, very early on, really thinking about climate change 30 years ago, and that panic of no one's talking about this, no one's thinking about this, what are we going to do? And I realized the dead were showing up because
Hmm.
they knew what, because they've done it.
Yeah.
They've been through the extinction event. So I guess that's the creation story of my work with the dead.
That's beautiful. Yes. I am one who also has conversations with the dead. So I love that we're in this world together, in this opportunity to give voice and to be able to listen to the messages that are coming through. What is one such message that the dead were teaching you about transformation, climate change, and extinction?
Mm. The biggest message they're teaching is that no one goes anywhere. We're all going to be reborn to the world we've made.
Mm.
It's the first law of the conservation of matter and energy. Nothing goes anywhere. And we will be reborn. You know, there are
Mm-hmm.
plenty of people who think they're going to ride it out, people of my generation. And, you know, I'll be gone before the worst of it. Will you be reborn into the worst of it? And what is it going to be like?
Mm.
And maybe you won't be reborn as a human being. Maybe you'll be reborn as a bird or a butterfly, singing, looking for someone, anyone else of your species, unable to find someone else to talk to. How do we imagine what that's going to be like? And how do we prepare? What world do we want to be reborn into? I think that's what the dead are
Mm-hmm.
saying. For tens of thousands of years, human beings, when they still remembered they were animals, wanted to be reborn to this world and these people, and they experienced themselves as a kind of perpetual coming and going and returning. You know, Tyson Yunkaporta, in his marvelous book Sand Talk, you know, says that in his language, the word for great grandmother is simply child.
Mm-hmm.
We recycle through each other, and if we felt those webs of entanglements and return, I think we live very, very differently than ecocidal, you know, late stage capitalism.
Yeah, it's so true. You know, the teachings that we talk a lot about here in these circles and that I have been taught is that, again, they're not human centric circles.
Yeah.
They're circles that recognize the different kingdoms of this planet and their creation story
Yeah.
and their wisdom. There is a reason to go and speak to a 200-year-old tree.
Oh,
It's been it's it's been around.
once my daughter suffers from a very severe genetic illness, and once in the early days before it was diagnosed, when I was at my wit's end, I go out in the mountains a lot. I live in the Catskills, and these mountains they really are nourishing. But I took a different path up the mountain, and I came upon a tree. And as far as I can reckon, this tree is probably 500 years old. Ancient
Mm.
oak with branches as big as most trunks stretching out just 100 feet, and this hillside filled with lupins. And I went and I sat against them, and I felt how deep the roots were. And I was there remembering the world this oak had seen vanish.
Mm-hmm.
And that oak said to me, I can hold whatever you're feeling. Can you hold what I'm feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's I remember one time in a meditation just realizing, everyone's trying to quote unquote save the world, which doesn't need to be saved.
No, it doesn't. You know
Yeah,
what I
what do
like
you
to say? Everyone's pro-choice. Well, among a lot of people I talk to, people are pro-choice. I say, are we willing to let the earth make her own decisions about her
Oh,
body?
yes. Exactly, right. And I think in those decision-making processes, as we are all creatures created in their image and likeness, as I was sitting there listening, the message that I got is we are here to witness. We are here to witness the
Yeah.
passing and the change. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's hard to bear witness. Human beings don't know how to
Mhm.
do it. We want to fix things. We want to change things. I mean, again, this is something I've learned having a child with this, an incurable genetic disorder. It's sort of pretty horrible. And most people, it panics people. And because they want to, tell me their solution or their remedy or their plan and every now and then you meet someone who just wants to have you tell their story. And wants to listen to the story. And I think you're right. I think the earth needs us to listen to the stories it's telling right now, right?
Mhm. Correct, yes, and not interject to prove a point. So, Perdita, you are an author. You are someone who flows easily with language, and that's not a gift that everyone has. In your discovery of language, can you share some words that you've had to kind of redefine for yourself?
Oh, oh, there's so many, aren't there?
Mhm.
One of the biggest for me is the word mother,
Hmm.
because for me, that word has been reduced into patriarchy, into this sentimental, impossible scapegoat of a who would want to do it biological determinism, right?
Mhm.
And I want to say, what would it be like to live among people whom everyone thought of themselves as a mother? The men, the women, the whatever gender people thought of themselves, the young, the old. What if everyone wanted and experienced themselves as a mother, that it didn't have anything to do with biological parenthood, but it had to do with the way we took care of each other, that we were mothers to each other? And that is a word I would like to reclaim as being aspirational.
Hmm. I love that, and you could even push it a little more. I like pushing things and say it's a state of being.
Exactly. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. It's a
Mm.
state of being, and it's a state of relationship.
Mhm.
What does it be to be mothers to each other? I often ask myself, what does it mean to be a mother of the dead? What does it mean to be? And what if it finally felt like there were enough mothers?
Mm.
I mean, I've gotten my deepest mothering from trees and animals and the earth.
And how is it, Perdita, you flow in between words and worlds so easily? It's a very non-Western thing. It's very indigenous, and I think that's why we've always gotten along.
I know. Well, it's so interesting. And a number of people have said that to me. And it's just because I talk to the dead.
Mm.
And to talk to the dead is to talk to the darkness and to talk and live inside the mystery. I think that's it. I think I just talk to the dead and they're very real to me. I mean, I always say, go out and pick up a handful of dirt and you're holding the dead in your hand. You're holding the vanished bodies of oceans. You're holding
Mm-hmm.
vanished forests. You're holding, that's the dead. And I think that very earthy reality for me is, and I guess I've always lived in an animate world.
Mm-hmm.
I have to credit my mother, my difficult, impossible mother I had that fight with. Who, who had a little too much bourbon every night and, was devoted to the New York Times, but was nevertheless a ecstatic gardener
Mm.
and an ecstatic animal lover. And so that I grew up in a home with fig trees, I mean, and this is in New England, with fig trees with figs on them and gardenias the size of Volkswagen bugs that we had instead of a dining room table in the middle of the room. And I mean, and then we had Borgenstrichters and iguanas and dozens of cats and dogs.
Mhm.
And so it was a very fecund world that my mother raised us in. And she was kind of feral. And I think that was the best part of her.
Mm.
The conventional part was the worst, and the feral part was the best. And so I guess I grew up in a world where plants and animals were really honored as guests at the table. I'm sure it doesn't always make me fit in conventional society very easily.
No, understood. We have a lot of animals here on the farm too, running around. What a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift.
It is, and I once had a friend, an old college friend, who came to visit for a weekend, and we have a lot of animals in my home now. And she said, "It's so adorable." She said, "How your kids give the animals little personalities." And after she left, my daughter looked at me and she said, "It's so cute how we." I shouldn't give this friend's name. How we give this friend a little personality.
Exactly. Oh, it's like, no, the animals have their personalities. So,
So do the plants, and so do the stones, and so do the
yes.
mountains and the rivers.
Mm.
You know,
Mhm. And if we could start allowing them, or like we were saying before, if we could start allowing ourselves to listen to their language, what a different world we would be in.
well, the lovely thing about that world, and the reason to learn those languages, is then you're not alone. You're never alone. When you start talking to the dead, you're never alone again. And I think people are so lonely and frightened in this culture.
Mhm.
It's just heartbreaking.
Mhm.
But there's no need to be lonely. There's so many. I mean, the truth is, the whole world, and I use this word, is nothing but mothers that have loved us forever, for
Mm.
lifetimes, in ways we can't even possibly imagine. I mean, if we could really take that in and bear witness to it, I think our hearts would break wide open. I know mine does.
Yeah, I feel my cup filling up with that. Thank you. Now, there's a certain wildness to living in this way, or as you said, your mother was feral. And I see a lot of wildness in your writing and how you're connecting people to their wildness. You did so with The Way of the Rose and now with The Dead. How does wildness, how is it a flavor of life for you?
Oh, it's such an interest. You ask wonderful questions because they stop me and they make me really go inside myself. I think a flavor of my life, what I like to say is I live by a forest ecology. And I think real wildness is I like all the different aspects of the forest. I live in a forest. I like the moss. I like the salamanders, and I like the weird slugs, and I like the different kinds of trees. And I think wildness means that I like it when other things are being wild with me.
Mm.
I think that the thing about domesticity is that it makes us all the same, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it homogenizes us. I sometimes say, monocultures gave rise to monotheism, gave rise to Monsanto. Is you know what I mean? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like everything has to be the same. It's all, ticky tacky, cookie cutter, one kind of chicken, one kind of cow. We're all eating, living in the same way. And the thing about wildness is, if we're in the fort, what am I going to be today? Am I going to be moss, or am I going to be lichen, or am I going to be a stream or a frog, or what am I going to be? Who am I going to be today? And that all those possibilities and multiplicities are inside of me and available to me.
Mm. To
Is
truly,
that
no,
an
that's
answer?
beautiful. No, I think that's a beautiful answer. It speaks a lot to like being in relationship. A lot that we also speak about is how, you speak of how we're walking, to paraphrase you, in a world, we are alive, walking in the land of the dead.
Yeah.
And for me, also, that another connection there is beyond that is we're all elements. you
Uh-huh.
know we are all in part those elements, therefore we can be that tree or that lichen or that ocean or that wave, as we connect at that elemental level.
I believe quite literally we have been. I think if we really unboxed our understanding of rebirth, we would understand. I mean, I think a long time ago, I've been to the caves in France and seen those cave paintings of animals. And I don't think those people painted those paintings thinking that they were painting something other than themselves. I think they were painting themselves. And I think they saw themselves. One moment, I'm a human. The next moment, I'm a deer who's ready to sacrifice myself to feed my people, to be reborn among my people, to become a deer again. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think if we knew we were moving through these great chains of reciprocal love, it would be really, really different. Here's another great story about my mother's a great teaching that unfortunately as a gardener, she did use pesticides and she got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So,
Mm.
and she was given 2 months to live,
Oh.
and she demanded they treat her and wanted the worst radiation and chemo. And it was brutal. Been through cancer treatment with someone even in the
Mm-hmm.
old days. It was really, fevers of 105, and I'd have to put her in ice baths, and she'd lost all her hair and was vomiting. And but the thing that upset her the most, she was very vain, was that her hair had fallen out. And we had this indolent Persian cat, this white Persian, useless white Persian cat, who had been named Baudelaire after a decadent French poet because he was such a,
Mm-hmm.
decadent being.
I know Baudelaire, yeah.
No one knew like how. Anyway, this cat decided, who had never done a useful thing in his life, that he was going to become my mother's hair, and he wouldn't get off of her head. And he draped himself over her head and became this white hair. And we had to move his kitty litter and his food into my mother's room. And I was worried about it. My mother wanted it because she felt beautiful with this cat on her head. And one
Mm-hmm.
day I was there, and we'd been to see the doctor that afternoon. And he said, look, he pulled me inside and said, this is crazy. You got to stop. She's not going to make it. And this is a horrible way to go. And so I was getting ready to have that conversation with her, and I was petting the cat on her head, and I felt tumors down his spine.
Mm.
It hadn't been there. And I rushed him to the vet, who was a family friend. And he said he's riddled with cancer. He's going to be dead in 24 hours, which he was. And my mother was alive 15 years later.
Wow.
And it was realizing that, in the Jataka tales in Buddhism, there are these stories of the Buddha sacrificing some self, incarnating as an animal and then sacrificing himself for someone. But they're told as if that's the exception, when in fact that's the everyday occurrence. in the animal and plant world. Animals and plants are
Mhm.
always doing that for us. They
Mhm.
hold their lives with so much love and care. And Baudelaire, who we called Bodhi, I realized his real name was Bodhisattva. He was a being ready to love and be reborn and care in ways I couldn't imagine. And I think if we knew how much the earth was trying to help us right now understand what we need to do. And you talked in the beginning about slow down. Like, I feel like don't you think that's the message that earth is trying to say to us? Could you slow down?
I think so, and I think maybe we have to redefine that word together, Perdita, because
Huh.
you tell people to slow down and they feel this constraint.
I
They don't feel the length of it or the depth
know.
of it or the invitation to swim in that slowness and rediscover and rebirth and die and live. And that is a breath. We don't live in our breath. And so maybe we can redefine slowness. What should we call it, Perdita?
Well, I want to live in the slow story. I sometimes say I want to live in the long story of life. I feel like we live inside a short story of a single life. And
Yeah.
we feel like we have to jam pack it with everything. We have to do
Hmm.
everything. We have to accomplish everything. And then there are all these people who haven't done everything and accomplished everything who feel like failures. And that's it, boom, boom, boom. And I think we have all the lifetimes in eternity to work with. And I don't think we have a clue how much time we have. We have enough time to go so slowly. I want to live in that slow, long story that just goes and goes, where we don't dismiss lives as useless and meaningless. And who knows, maybe we live a life as sometimes I say, how many lifetimes did Mozart live singing off key just to get the feel for it? You know what I mean? Like, we don't
Hmm.
know. How many lifetimes was he born unable to sing? How many lifetimes was he born as a bird? We don't really know what we're up to.
Hmm.
There's a lot of mystery out there. So maybe we should slow. What word would you use other than slowness?
I mean, I like slowness.
I do.
I feel like for
Always
me,
listen to gym class, by the way. So I really like.
exactly, right? I mean, I know we use the term circle here a lot, living in,
Yeah.
in a more circular time than in that line. But the thing that comes to me right now, and maybe it's because of the conversation we're having or the day, I remember as a child, my excellent days of adventure always smelled like strawberries. So
Oh,
for me, I think that's where I want to live. In that day that just smells like endless adventures and strawberries, where you
do you
can.
remember that feeling at the end of the day? You'd be like called to dinner and you're like, no, don't make it end. No, it can't be over.
Exactly.
I was usually sitting around in some tree with little moss and acorn beings. I was imagining, for hours.
Mm. I wish everyone could wrap their arms around, or as we have been speaking, mother themselves in this lesson of this lifetime and the ones that they've had in the past and those in the future. I think if we were able to do that, to really, again, live that strawberry day, we could learn that lesson. We could, like you said, Mozart could finally sing in tune after many lifetimes as a bird or as someone who couldn't hear or sing. And yet we don't know how to cross that bridge. So, how do the dead for you? How have they taught you to cross that bridge, to send that message to the rest of humanity?
Well, here's a simple thing. The dead take care of a lot of trouble for me. They're very good helpers. And sometimes Kuan Yin is shown with, thousands of arms, right? Well, the
Mm-hmm.
dead have more arms and tentacles and feet than we can imagine. And when I work with the dead, I really ask for their help. And they have shown me how to live in an economy of prayer instead of an economy of money.
Mm-hmm.
They have shown me how much healing is available. They are sneaky. you know, when I talk, my next book is called Take Back the Magic, and I mean it. Anyone can make magic happen with the dead. This is what people used to know before religious authorities silenced these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And these used to be ubiquitous conversations for people in an age before technology and money. If you needed healing, you had to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And learning to ask for that help from the dead, they show up, they get the job done, and it's kind of amazing. And then you want to show up for them. You want to show up and you notice what they're doing. Sometimes I see the weeds in the city. You said you were in Manhattan,
Mm-hmm.
the weeds cracking the asphalt in Manhattan. And I always wish, I always say little cheerleading prayers to those guys, like, go for it. You're doing it. You guys are the best, What helpers can I send to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
And I pray for those rivers underground Manhattan
Mm-hmm.
to, burst up through the concrete. But we also have to know what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we have to know what world we want. What world do we want to be reborn into? And getting to that world is going to be a lot of chaos and change. We're going to need the guidance of people who can see in the dark, and the dead know how to see in the dark. And that's what I've learned. I trust their guidance. Once, I have a lot of psychic friends. But my best psychic friend, a woman I wrote a book with called The Reluctant Psychic, she's an extraordinary woman. And as a child, she had to teach herself how to tell the difference between the living and the dead.
Mm-hmm.
She came home from kindergarten. It was the first time she went to school. And she said to her mother, why do all the other children have so many helpers? They all have helpers around them. And so her mother marched into the teacher and said, how come my daughter doesn't have any helpers? Beleaguered first grade kindergarten teacher looked at this mother and said, I got 30 kids in this classroom. It's just me, and there are no helpers, and your kid lies, But the truth is we all have legions of helpers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some circles now lately, there's been a lot of like, I need to heal my family lineage. There's a lot of that kind of conversation these days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is the dead don't need our healing. They are dead.
Mm-hmm.
They're on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
and they have gained wisdom from the mistakes they've made. We need healing and we need help. And we need to call on them so that they can help us activate our wisdom from within. And we have helpers. There are a lot of helpers, and they're really here. But one of the times, once the psychic and I, we had been somewhere, we were in New York City in Grand Central Station on a Friday at 5:00. And it was wall to wall people. And we're both country mice. And it was very overwhelming. And the people couldn't move. It's one of those crowds that's frightening because nobody
Mm-hmm.
can move. You almost can pick up your feet. My friend, her name's Fiona, she said, step to the side, step to the side. I was just barely able to step to the side. And she said, step to the side again. And there was a door in the wall, just a door. We were underground. And she said, open it. And I opened it, and we stepped out, and we were on 42nd Street, and there was no one there. And I said, how did you do that? She said, oh, the dead showed up and told me where the door was. And she said, and they said, there's a smoothie place around the corner. And
Mm-hmm.
the dead will show us how to step to the side. They will help us, and they
Mm-hmm.
will show us how to get out of that awful scrum, all moving in one direction.
Mm. They show us, almost to connect again to, if we tie it back to the wildness of being able to move with instincts, to be able to move in a very different way instead of, as you were saying, in a very monolithic way.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I love doing offerings of tobacco and cornmeal when I'm in Manhattan. That's what I do to try to encourage. Encourage those, blades of grass and those underground rivers, and to feed the dead as well. Because
it's important to feed the dead because the dead feed us with their bodies. Dirt is nothing but the bodies of the dead, and everything we eat grows from those bodies. And we need to remember that. And our own bodies will become food for the dead. I mean, that's the ecological equation human beings want to deny. Whatever eats is eaten, I mean, there's a wonderful book I love. It's called The Animal Way of Death. And it was written by a biologist from the University of Vermont. I can't remember his name, unfortunately, right now. But he describes the death of a mouse and what happens when that mouse dies. Sad moment for the mouse. But this undertaker beetle, it is a great and good day because that undertaker beetle sees the mouse corpse, climbs up on top of it, and starts to do this crazy little dance that invites all the other undertaker beetles that, like, this is the time to party. This is the time to make more undertaker beetles. We've got a house, food, we're going to get down. You know what I mean? Like, and which is what they do. And then they lay their eggs inside the corpse, which comes out of it. So the death of one thing is the beginning of life for a whole other set of beings. And I think we have to remember about our own deaths. Our body is going to be the food for the life that goes on. I want the life of this planet to continue. I don't necessarily need my species to continue.
And so, what are the words or the language that you use with a society that is so afraid of death, that doesn't know how to die?
I know. Right? Oh, gosh. We're such a mess, right? Well, I was just down with my father-in-law, who's 91. And has been a religious man in a traditional Christian way his life. But I said to him, when you're gone, what prayer do you want me to say to call you to me? Because I will be working with you. And he had one. And I needed him to know that our relationship would be transitioning. And in fact, might be getting a little more serious and intense. I would say I'm not scared. But, we should be talking about when the dead die, it's because they've got work to do on the other side. And when we die, it's because we've got work to do on the other side, right? But also when we die, all of those beings who've known us in so many other lives are waiting to celebrate with us and welcome us. Another psychic friend of mine, I got a lot of psychic friends. This woman is so interesting. Every psychic seems to have their kind of little specialty. Hers is that she can see the souls arriving as someone's about to die. And she said she can always tell when someone's about to die because the mothers start to arrive from past lives. The mother's waiting to hold that child again. So even the person dying in some horrible IC unit alone and intubated is passing into the arms of more mothers who have loved that soul than we can possibly imagine.
Mm.
And it's also, I suppose at some moment I'll see my own complicated mother with whom I've done a lot of fabulous work from the land of the dead. And I'll also know, we'll have a lot to catch up on.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to be ready for those moments. We want to be ready for those conversations when they come up. People are very frightened of the dead. Fear of the dead was a tool of religious authority to establish their power over people.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to look in these old manuscripts. You'll find these bishops and cardinals, how do we get people to stop going to the graveyards and talking to the dead and listening to us,
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of year propaganda campaign has been to make people frightened of the dead. Frightened of cemeteries, the walking dead, ghouls, zombies, ghosts, all of this. I'm not afraid of any of the dead. I mean, I'm very frightened of certain living beings. Birds
True.
on Wall Street. I'm scared out of my gourd. But I'm not scared of the dead. And I'm not scared of any of the dead. Even those who've been monsters in life, poor things that they are on the other side, to see what they've done. But that's the thing that happens when we die, is that shift in perspective. It's like seeing a piece of embroidery from the other side. And I go, oh, Fiona, my psychic who said, step to the side, she said, the first words of some people when they die is, oh shit. I had no idea.
I'm sure others were like, oh, I was wrong.
Who knows? But, the thing is, what we learn on the other side is that we're all each other's mothers. We're all each other's lovers. We're all each other's friends. We've been so many different things to each other. If we could only feel it while we were alive. If we only could, I want to know that while I'm still alive.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think people can connect to that, Perdita? Of course, reading your books, listening to you, listening to this podcast and me.
I teach courses on how to do this with people. And it's really, I think the hardest thing is deconditioning ourselves out of those fears and deconditioning out of those selves. Well, it's just my imagination. Well, what do you think your imagination is? Imagination is a powerful thing. The simplest thing is the dead are real. All the dead are real. And they want to help you and they want to collaborate with you. And there are a lot of different ways to get to know them and to work with them. But it really all comes down to that. They're real, they're right here, and they want to collaborate with us. And that might be something as simple as getting yourself a parking space. I don't know. I've seen people, small asks can build big confidence. And sometimes we ask for something small and we really experience the dead showing up and helping us. And the next thing we know, we ask for more and we ask for more. I'll never forget, I had an uncle who was famously estranged from my mother, the brother of my mother, and they were great fighters. And after he was dead, I can't tell you why I was having a hard time forgiving him, because I've promised him I'll never tell anyone ever again. But I was mad at him. And I said to him, you got to make this right with me. You got to find some way to make peace with Mom and me. And I don't know, do something big and show me you're there. And that afternoon, I kid you not, I got an email from his daughter from his second marriage, who I didn't even know knew my email. I didn't even, I barely knew her. I'd only met her like twice. And she wrote me a letter and she said, Perdita, didn't your mother die of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma eventually? Because my boyfriend is leading the fight against Monsanto. And I was wondering if you might want to be included in the class action suit.
Wow.
Yep. It was that instantaneous. And that's why I don't tell the story about him. And that's why his picture's on my ancestor altar. And I've asked him to do other things. He's amazing. He's wonderful. I love him. All of his sweetness. And we often think we have to talk ourselves into forgiving the dad, and we don't. We have to demand they show up and atone for mistakes they've made. And when they do, we'll feel better about them.
Yeah. And sometimes use their deviousness to good.
Oh, oh, always, always.
Kind of get a good team here.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, I'm praying for sugar sobriety right now, and the person I'm asking for help, I'm praying for really honest sugar sobriety. It's been my addictive problem, and the person I've asked for help is my best friend's mom, who died of alcoholism at 53. Who better to ask for help?
Mm-hmm.
She knows what happens if you don't get sober.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got a picture of her right out there on my little sobriety altar, and she and I are having a lot of good conversations. I love her. She's wonderful. She's been very helpful to me. So, yeah.
It is beautiful that she is able to share the lesson of her life with you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and she has so much. And she's been, you know, a woman whose life seemed about abject and heartbroken. Well, we don't know what we're looking at. Sometimes that descent to the underworld takes more than one life.
Mm-hmm.
So those people have wisdom. Those souls have wisdom. I pray also to the extinct species of my land, you know. I pray to the passenger pigeons. I pray, I've learned the names of, you know, the Carolina parakeets and the American chestnut trees. I need their wisdom at this moment for climate change. They've done extinction. Help us.
Yeah. Well, if you want a really good conversation with someone who is in an amazing life-death cycle, talk to rainbow trout. They've got a lot to talk about how to evolve from a consciousness of a global to an even individual consciousness. So I had a good chat with them, a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just saying.
I want to hear all about it. Will you tell me more about it?
Really good chat. The conversation, a lot of the practices that I'm trained in and taught is that those conversations are necessary, right? To really be able to be in good relationship. And
yes,
it happened that I was up in Michigan, place where I spent a lot of time growing up, and I had to go up. I landed after 17 hours of, traveling. And before I packed, for some reason, I carry altars with me. I brought with me a picture of rainbow trout. And I was like, this one's coming with me. And it became very evident on the trip why. As I got into a car and then drove 5 hours up to see the sun setting up on Lake Michigan.
Wow.
That was kind of my beginning of that conversation, and just sitting with them and just asking them questions and of their evolution and how they have evolved in a conscious level, physically, how they're evolving. They're literally genetically changing so that they can adapt, and they know how to do it.
Right.
They will survive. They will be fine. They might become birds if that's what they need to do, And so it was interesting to just sit with that consciousness. And part of the consciousness is their ability. They're trying to figure this out. So more are living and dying. The cycle is shorter, but they're coming back, right? And so they have this death consciousness as all rainbow trout that they share with the salmon, that's what they feed off, right? And so they're having shorter cycles of this, shorter stories, because they're having to change, grow, and evolve at a faster pace than they've had to. So it was interesting to sit with them and witness that. But it was this collective intelligence and memory. And they're very matter of fact, not like humans, who are just clawing to, remain here, but just very matter of fact of like, of course we're evolving. Of course we're changing. This is what we're here to do. Aren't you?
And that we have to
Yeah.
watch those things that are changing. People get very upset about the invasive species here, but we're not going to eradicate them. And they're coming. I talk to them because they're doing fascinating work. Do you know what I mean? That nobody else wants to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean to come in and leach out the heavy metals from a soil that nobody else wants to grow in? They're really the cleaner upper crew. Or to prepare the forest. They can see ahead. I think they're very prophetic. They can see what's coming. They're preparing the soil. They're preparing ways to help make things change.
Yeah, agree. There's trees here in Hawaii that many of the locals don't like, and I've have a lot of conversations with them. They're called Christmas berry,
Huh.
and they're invasive, but wow, do they know how to grow? And the way that they grow is that they are willing to try growing at any like risk to themselves. If they like shoot out a limb and it's not working, they'll kill it off and shoot out another one. And it's just like they're not afraid of making mistakes. They're not afraid of dying to live. And they're amazing lessons, I think, for all of us as we continue to learn how to speak to the dead.
Yeah. And to know, I want to be reborn with people who can help me hit the ground running, whatever I come back as,
Mm-hmm.
You can help show me. I want to be able to collaborate with the renewal of this planet in whatever ways this earth needs me to do it.
Beautiful. Yes, and I hope to see you and continue to seeing you in this lifetime and in the next, Perdita.
Yeah, I know. I want to go out in the woods with you now. I'm dying.
Yeah, I'll have to make sure that next time I'm out on the East Coast, I come up to visit you, get
If
some
you I'd
time.
love to have you. I'd love to take you out in the woods if you want to come up.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, we'll do that. And also, if you make your way to the Big Island, let us know.
Oh, I have a lot of friends there. I've never been and I've always wanted to go. I've always wanted to see Pele.
Well, she's speaking loudly right now. So,
I know.
yeah, talk about someone who knows how to die and be rebirth and create. I think this is what this island is really can teach the world, is how to create from the unknown, which is what these islands are doing, literally creating new life from what we think is unknown.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just read this wonderful book. It's called Other Lands by Thomas Halliday, and goes backwards. It's like a time travel adventure through all 6 extinction events. And he just looks at this rhythm of, efflorescence and diversity, and then collapse and extinction. And then when you have these extinction moments, there's space that's created for things that haven't been imagined. New things arise. And so it's a really sort of different, unanthropocentric look at goings on.
Beautiful. I'll definitely have to check out that book and check out your book. When is it coming out, Perdita?
My book is coming out in fall 2023. Take Back the Magic, Getting to Know the Dead. And I have another book called Way of the Rose, which I think you know about, which is about praying with the earth. And I'm not writing any more books this summer. That's I'm resting. I'm slowing down.
Good. I'll send you my story so you can, sit with that and just read something else. I will.
Yes, please. I want to read. I just want to read and take in. That's what I want.
Yes, and have your cup full. And thank you so much for taking this time. And I hope that this conversation, and also, I just want to thank you and honor you for living the life that you are living and to be able to witness it. It is such a gift to be able to.
I don't even how we became friends on Facebook, but you are such a nourishment to me. Everything you do and say, I just makes my soul sing. So thank you for your presence in the world.
Well, let us continue together. We are never alone, inspiring each other as we feed the dead and reimagine new ways to connect, listen, learn, and slow down. Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone can take an opportunity to find Perdita. We'll have links below, and sit down and have your cup full as you relearn and remember that you are loved by all your mothers, especially Mother Earth. Shade. Once again, it is with deepest gratitude that I bow to you for joining me on this podcast, this episode, this circle, this plática, this meditation, this remembering. I hope that you have stayed curious. I hope to see you in the circle again next week. So make sure that you like or follow. Until then, may you be blessed with abundance of peace and radical self-love.